this topic on lifelong learning, and we do have a great panel, although there is an apology from Tony, who could not make it today because of an urgent meeting in the office. So let's, while you're waiting for starting the webinar, can I just ask how many people consider themselves lifelong learners? So if you want to just show your hand or raise a hand for that, that'll be fantastic. Alrighty, fantastic. So Wendy, Julie, Gary, okay, yep, excellent. And that's quite an interesting question about really, what is the definition of lifelong learning or being a lifelong learner? And one of the things is obviously that you kind of continuously learn. So we'll explore that in greater detail. But before we leave the screen, on your screen, just to let you know that we've just announced our next two webinars, one for Learning Cafe on learning portals. This was actually quite a popular choice when we put it on LinkedIn. So almost 80% of the people who responded wanted a webinar on learning portals, and I think we'll have a very good webinar on learning portals. So if you want to register, the link is down there on web links, and we'll make these links also available through chat a little bit later. The other one is around essentially ensuring, or how do you ensure that the organization has technology capabilities or information technology capabilities for the current needs and also the future needs. So it's especially since technology pretty much changes every day. So it's going to be an interesting discussion. We do have Arya Dawn from ISPAC on the panel, plus a couple of others who we will confirm very soon, and really should be a pretty interesting discussion. So hopefully you can register for that. But let's now go to the webinar, and I think just in terms of the topic today, it's one that is very close to Learning Cafe. And during this webinar, if you do have a chance to tweet using a Twitter back channel, the hashtag of lifelong learning, LRN Cafe, is there. But really, this is quite an I guess it's an informal discussion between all of us, and please feel free to use the QA box to give your comments, your opinions. We do value diversity of opinion, so would be very, very happy to have any views. So please do do that. Excellent. So let me just introduce the panel. And our panel is a busy bunch today. So Tony Gleason, who is the CEO of Araya, has passed on his apologies just because he had a very important board meeting come up, which was a bit urgent. But I shall walk through his slides. We also have Kristen. Kristen is the HR Manager, Performance and Capability Development for Austrade, or the Australian Trade and Investment Commission. So, Kristen, welcome to the panel.
Thank you. Hello.
Great. So, looking forward to your slides. We also have Rhonda, who should be joining us very soon. Actually, she's on her way to Perth, so she'll be joining from the airport. So she'll be logging in and joining us soon. So once we've kind of just gone through the introductions, there is a few, we've tried to change the format a little bit. So we've got a whiteboard, and hopefully you can participate in that. But a quick email that I sent today about Capability Cafe and Learning Cafe. You might be kind of thinking, what is Capability Cafe, especially since the Learning Cafe has been around for some time. But essentially, Learning Cafe and Capability Cafe are community of practicing professionals in learning and capability management professionals, respectively. And if you've been to any of the Learning Cafe events or discussions, we do have kind of a multi-channel approach to engaging with the community. What's taken off in the recent past really is the catch-ups in pretty much every major Australian city, and we've just also started catch-ups in Auckland and Wellington. So the huge variety of ways that you can actually engage with Learning Cafe. So please do, go to the website, which is learningcafe.com.au, and have a look at what's there. We also have the Melbourne Unconference coming up in 16th August 2017. So this will be a third Melbourne Unconference. It is an excellent format, so please do register for that. We've got pretty much very good facilitators, plus great content, plus fantastic discussion. So it does turn out to be a day of great professional development value. And it's only limited to a maximum of 120 to 130. So it is an intimate setting, and you do get a lot of value out of that. Just like I said, we've announced the two webinars at the beginning of the session. So please do go to either Learning Cafe or Capability Cafe to join. A quick slide on our model of capability management, which has been evolving through discussions in Sydney and now in Melbourne. We're taking a more comprehensive view of how learning should be designed, because the focus is on capability and delivering what capability is required for organization. So, knowledge, skills, learning is one leg, but we also have the tools and processes that employees or workforce needs to implement. But finally, also the context, which comprises of the reward system and the culture and the leadership. So, the the proposition being that if one of the legs of the stools is not there, the stool just won't stand, so you won't get business results. So in fact, when you're designing something, you need to consider all three components and make sure that all three work. Okay, so we've got some stats, and I this is the stat that you responded through the survey for registration. 98% have indicated that they have traits of a lifelong learner, which includes 69% who say, yes, definitely, I'm a lifelong learner, and 29% say, yes, occasionally, and only 2% no, but I intend to. And we'd love to have some comments. We'd love to have comments about what is your definition of lifelong learning, and really, what does it, why are you a lifelong learner? And I'll also now like to welcome Rhonda, who's just joined the panel. So Rhonda, thank you very much. I know that you're flying to Perth, so welcome aboard. And if you can enable your audio, that'll be fantastic. We'll when you come to your slides. So in the chat that's there, or the QA panel, what is your definition of lifelong learning? If you could just share with us, that'll be excellent. But certainly a big emphasis on learning all the time. But we're in the other lens as L&D and HR professionals. The question we asked was, while lifelong learning is obviously great for the employees in the workforce, what is the benefit for organizations, because they are the one who have to support it. So 39% says that it helps to adapt the change faster, right? And 28% says that it increases employee engagement, which is a real issue in the workforce. 25% said that it can continuously improve skill levels in the workforce, and 8% says makes them more productive. So I want to actually just hand it over to Kristen. Kristen, do you have any views on this slide, on the results?
Yes, I absolutely agree with the helps to adapt to change faster, and we're seeing this rapid increase in technology and digital, and so if we're not lifelong learners, I think we'd be finding this very, very, very challenging. So absolutely. And I like to think that employees are always going to be better next year than they are this year. So I think definitely increases employee engagement and just improving continuously your workforce. Yeah, absolutely. No, they all make sense. Totally agree.
Wonderful. And I might actually also get Rhonda, if Rhonda's connected through the audio, because I know Rhonda is very intimately connected with RE, and she's one of the directors of RE. So Rhonda, what's any views on the statistics that are presented on the slide?
I think they're pretty hard to argue with. I think that they're very straightforward. I can only add small things to what Kristen already said. But I think the main gain is that organisations are changing so rapidly, is that there probably isn't an organisation on earth that can decide what training or learning or new skills they need. So what you're really looking for is an employee group that can actively find the skills as needed, as well as an organisation that's moving forward. So I love that first one, helps to adapt to change faster, because I think that's where it lives.
And just in terms of the employee engagement, the reports that I've read is that it's becoming increasingly difficult to kind of increase employee engagement past a certain level. So it kind of just plateaus and becomes more difficult. Is that something that you've also found in the workplace?
Are you talking to me again? I think
Yes, Rhonda.
employee engagement is one of many interesting scores. It is hard to get right. I'd prefer to work with things like promoter scores. I'd prefer to things just hard statistics like people stay or go, and so it's that combination. So it is really hard to get right. It's certainly, this is one of the keys of getting engagement and contribution right. But I'd always err on the side of it's very important in getting a greater contribution or a more aligned contribution to what the person can give than just pure engagement.
Thank you. Moving on to the next slide, and the question we asked was, what is the best way to empower employees to become lifelong learners? And 67% have indicated that providing coaching and support to become a lifelong learner is probably the best way to do it. 28% have indicated providing access to courses that they can choose from is one of the ways that can be done. 3% have said give them a budget to do courses that they want to do. So essentially, what we're talking about here is that each employee is kind of allocated a budget, and they are free to do whatever course they wish to. And 2% is said that there is really no need to encourage employees to become, one. So I think just on this, slide, the question about providing them a budget to spend on learning is an interesting one. So we do have a comment from Ingan in the chat. So yeah, thanks for that. And I think Dylan's also typing. So that's fantastic. Keep the chat going on the chat box. This was one we asked just to find how aligned L&D HR are with this whole concept of making employees lifelong learners. 62% said that yes, human development is a core value of L&D and HR, so certainly aligns with that. 30% said yes, as it improves business outcomes. 6% weren't sure, and 2% said that no, HR really won't kind of care about this. So can I just probably go to Kristen first as kind of an HR professional. So Kristen, in terms of helping the workforce become lifelong learners, so once they leave our organizations, they keep learning and they keep upgrading skills so that they get better employment, I guess. What's your own view on that one?
Oh, absolutely. It's a core value of HR and L&D. Human development, getting helping people achieve their potential, and most of my colleagues and peers who are in this role, in this game, that's why they get out of bed in the morning, because they're passionate about unleashing people's human potential. So and then we have to think, okay, great, unleash the human potential, but it will improve the business outcome. So those two, yeah, definitely very much aligned.
Rhonda, your views on the slide?
I agree with Kristen completely. I think the best HR people, and certainly a whole new wave of HR people that are coming through, this is a core value for them, and unashamedly so. I do remember a time when you said, oh, I really care about people development and people potential, it was like, oh gosh, no, I'd rather be a business partner. But nowadays those things go hand in hand and they're seen as the same. So I think it's absolutely true. The vast majority of good HR people completely support human development. I was only a little bit concerned that we still had 8% not sure about it or not agreeing to it, which was like, oh man.
Um, yeah, like completely. And I think we, it's kind of good to go back to caring for employees after caring for business a lot. So I think it kind of goes around in circles. It's nice to kind of see it swing around a little bit. Um, we will be talking about a lot of things in this presentation. And one of the questions that we'll cover is really, how important is lifelong learning for individuals? Who's responsible for it? What role do L&D play and HR play? And if indeed, if anybody knows of any instances where it's already happening, if you could share it with us, that'll be excellent. But if it's not happening that much, what do we really need to do to make that happen? So we'll be discussing this along the way, and please feel free to give your comments. So again, apologies on behalf of Tony, who was caught up in an extremely urgent meeting. So I'll present the slides for him. But Tony presented at the Learning Cafe Unconference in Sydney on the same topic, lifelong learning. So I think just as Rhonda mentioned, and I think Kristen also indicated, is it's kind of a slam dunk. There's really nothing to discuss. Lifelong learning is important for everyone in this changing world, and shrinking terms of shrinking time with companies. Job tenures are becoming shorter, and so certainly it's something that we can't dispute. And I think the other question is quite interesting, because I was also hearing a podcast from Wharton about generation generation Y, Z, etc. And there is a feeling in the younger generation that the degree really doesn't give them what they need for the money they spend, especially in the US. So they spend a lot of money getting a degree, and what the people who come out, or the students who come out, are kind of not really prepared for the workforce. And a realization that what you get in the college is just part of the knowledge and skills that you require for jobs in real life. So there's this whole shift towards, for example, MOOCs, and this whole journey of continuously, learning. And certainly for myself, to be honest, I did my master's in MBA a long time back. Certainly there is a thirst for me to go back to university and do another degree, or some other form of informal learning. So hopefully one day we'll kind of get around to that. But the Economist also said in their article that the classical model of education, which is kind of the burst at the start with college and school, and then top up of company training, is breaking down. And that's quite interesting, because whereas earlier the company kind of took a substantial responsibility for upgrading the skills of the workforce with budget cuts, and also with the increase in contingent workforce, there isn't, my feeling is that there isn't that much responsibility that they feel anymore. So, for example, contractors, they're really not part of the training provided by the company in a lot of cases. So it's kind of back to the individual to look after their own skills. So I'm just wondering, on this slide, the Kristen, do you have any personal views on, I guess, lifelong learning and the value of college education, and picking up skills after you finish college?
Yeah, well, my first degree was in a Bachelor of Science with agriculture and with
Okay.
economics.
Yep.
So I definitely started off, with a learning foundation which was quite different to where I am today. Um, but I absolutely believe in this, education for curiosity and creativity. So I think one of the best TED Talks is the one about teaching children creativity at school. So I definitely think that there's something to say about learning to learn, teaching, the skill of learning to learn. And I just saw recently that one of the most participated MOOC courses is in fact the course called Learning to Learn. So yeah, that's a great one. Um, yeah, so my views are that what's the value of a degree? I think we will see the value of MBAs probably declining in the future as people opt for more just-in-time learning that's going to get them through whatever's happening at the present time.
Thanks, Kristen. Rod, any views on this point?
I think that lifelong learning is, when you look at the people who've had those beautiful careers, they've gone on to do great things for the world, not just what they were doing as a job. They are lifelong learners. So I think we've known for a long time that lifelong learning is incredibly valuable. But I think your points are well made, that the traditional way of looking at education will change quite dramatically. And I think part of that will be that the skills we need to actually do a job are often best learnt on the job. And the other part of it is, we've already started at one of the universities where I'm lecturing, is we've been gamifying courses and looking at them quite differently. And what we've found is that by gamifying a course, we can shut or close down an actual module of a degree. One that we actually trialled across a real group of first-year students in economics is it went from 5 months, which is the normal course time, to 13 days. And they used to have just under 50% of the students passing. The pass rate on that particular course was 85%. Now, the great news about that is you could do an entire undergraduate degree in 9 months. But of course, when you sit with the finance committee and talk about that, half the room goes, wow, that's fantastic, this is the future. And the other half goes, our business model's broken. So we're going to have to find a way to overcome the things that will stop us from moving learning into a very different way of thinking about it for the future.
Thanks, Rhonda. Can I ask you a question to both of you, because you've both worked in HR positions? Is the recruitment of people into the company now, is there, are companies now, from your experience or your view, looking for people who are kind of naturally curious, and maybe you can do some test, or even through the interview try to find out if there is that thirst for learning or continuous improvement, and is that kind of becoming a more important criteria when you're looking for people to join the company? Kristen, can I start with you?
Oh, for Austrade, absolutely. Yeah, we don't tend to look at, we're interested in what degrees people have studied, but some of the more important capabilities that we're looking for is the ability to learn a language, for example. Has the person had an overseas experience? And often, the ability to learn a language and the ability to live in a different culture can be an indicator of a lifelong learner. So yeah, we don't focus on degrees and formal education. We look at a person's life experience and how that could fit with Austrade.
Rhonda?
Completely agree. We've been in financial services, we've been interviewing for and psychometric testing for curiosity and openness to learn and complex problem solving since 2010. So I think it's well and truly entrenched, and it will just continue that way. I was with a professional services company yesterday, and that's in their first 3 things that they interview for every single person joining their business. So I think that one is an absolute importance, and one to be talking about right from kindergarten or perhaps even earlier.
Thank you, Rhonda. Just some stats to back up the need for lifelong learning. This one is from the Workforce Aging Report from Australian Government. And as you can see, the pink lines, and it's broken up by age group. So you can see that the pink or the red lines for the age group 45 to 54 and 55 to 64 has increased the most, right? So almost by 80% for 55 to 64, and the second largest was 45 to 54. So what this means is that people are working for longer, right, or need to work for longer. So obviously the retirement age has gone up, but I think even apart from that, I personally, anecdotally, I've kind of met people who say that I need to work longer because I'm not sure what I'll do after retirement. So that's there, which means that if you're working longer, and we kind of also know that the half-life of skills is decreasing, that might imply that you might need to actually start a second career or a third career, as you go along, which requires lifelong learning. Um, in terms of the next slide, that you know, I think there was some kind of a statistic I was reading that 50% of the jobs that will be advertised, 10 years from now, don't exist at the moment, right? So it's almost impossible to train yourself or educate yourself for a job after 10 years, and you just have to learn and adapt as you go along. So um, there certainly is, you've got some indicators in terms of the rise of MOOCs and consumption of that. And the interesting thing about MOOCs is that people who are already, the consumption of MOOCs in the group of people who are already quite well qualified, educated, is much, much higher than people who do not have, a higher level of education. So it looks like people who start with a good base of learning keep continuing doing that. Okay, so we kind of talked about the growth mindset, and lifelong learning is part of the growth mindset. But I'm going to now pass it. Who's responsible? That's Bill Murray saying that's pretty much you, and that's an interesting question that we'll discuss. But I'm going to pass it on to Kristen. Kristen, over to you.
Yeah, okay. Thanks to you. Yeah, just jumping back to that growth mindset slide that you showed before. I mean, that is such a useful model for learning, and we sneak it into a lot of our programs and into our courses. And I think it's they talk about an organizational an organization having a growth mindset or a fixed mindset. So often, your individuals have a growth mindset where they're willing to learn and continuous learning, and they're curious and open to new ideas. But they say an indicator of an organization having a growth mindset is one of the factors is, does that organization promote internal candidates for roles? So I think that's really interesting to think that an organization can think whether people are able to change and develop. And of course, us in the Learning D, we obviously believe that people can develop. Okay, so getting back to my presentation on Austrade, what I thought I'd do, and it's a little bit of a case study on how we do things in Austrade. So I thought I'd just give an intro to Austrade. I'll talk about our corporate university or our learning portal. I'll talk about our learning communities and some of our programs, and then some of the policies that we've put into place to help lifelong learning, and also a little bit about Austrade's learning culture, and then finally I'll finish with a wonderful TED talk that you can all look at later. Okay, so Austrade. Um, I've just done a snip of our web page here, and of what we do. So we're obviously an Australian government agency, and we're in the same portfolio as the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, which is obviously a very, very big department. We Our role in Austrade, and we've got a few roles, but the overall arching purpose of Austrade is to develop Australia's economic prosperity through helping develop international markets for exporters. That's what we've always done, and we continue to do that, but we've actually added a few more uh, roles to what we do. And one of them is attracting productive foreign direct investment. So we help businesses find foreign money to help them grow their business. We also promote international education. So some of you would know that international education education in Australia is one of our biggest exports as far as attracting foreign students to come and study in Australia. We also have a division that um, ensures Australia's tourism supply, if you like. We strengthen the tourism industry in Australia because, again, tourism earns a big export dollar too, with foreign tourists coming to Australia. And in some locations, our role is to provide consular and passport services. So because we work with the Department of Foreign Affairs, some locations they don't actually have an embassy, so we provide those services in the more remote locations. And if you look at the next slide, the next slide shows Austrade's international network. I guess I can control this. Oh no, you're controlling it. That's great.
Yes, you can. No,
So
you can control it.
I can control. Okay, I'll take over the controls here. So this is a snapshot of Austrade's international network, and as you can see, we're located all around the world. We have approximately 80 offices internationally, and we have 38 offices in Australia. We've got approximately 1,200 employees, but what's interesting about our network is that 50% of our employees are locally engaged staff. So we have people, for example, in China who are working for us to develop networks and export or identify export opportunities in those countries. And I think when we talk about lifelong learning, I think this the nature of our organisation makes that imperative to be able to learn about different languages and culture, learn about different industries and markets. So I think that's the crux of our lifelong learning there. So a learning portal. We wouldn't be able to provide as many learning opportunities and communicate with our staff if we didn't have our corporate university, or what we call the Austrade Institute. This is our portal for everything around learning and also around performance as well. So it's quite a sophisticated talent management system. It's actually Cornerstone on demand. I don't know whether any of our listeners are using this one, but it enables us to have a comprehensive e-learning catalogue, and we have a e-learning builder and designer in-house that does a lot of our technical online training for the business. But it also is where we put our resources. And as you can see on the left-hand side, there are a few of the resources that all the whole organisation has access to. And again, we do our performance management also through this system. So Austrade has been providing online learning for a long time, and we've got a very e-learning savvy workforce who just absolutely devour these learning courses that we put here online. I think what has demonstrated Austrade's learning agility is when we rolled out lynda.com, and I don't know whether everybody's familiar with that, but it's an online catalogue of short videos for learning. We decided to open the whole Lynda catalogue up to the organisation, so they're free to learn everything that's available, photography, paper mache, or whatever Lynda offers, they're able to learn it. And we saw an amazing take up of users using Lynda, and it's often just the bite-sized learning. So I think that for me demonstrated the lifelong learning that we actually have with our employees in Austrade. One of the features of our corporate university is the ability to have learning communities. So because we've got such a dispersed workforce, it's very expensive to bring people together to learn in a classroom. So whenever we do this, when we bring people together, it has to be about that learning exchange that they get from the participants in the room. It can't be about the content. We've got other methods of delivering the content, so we do that, but we bring people together to learn from each other and to discuss things. So most of our programs, whether they're completely online or whether they're delivered by video conference or whether they're face-to-face, we set up a learning community. And with this learning community, we start a conversation about the program before the participants come together. So I think that's a great functionality about our corporate university, is this ability to set up these learning communities. And it works a little bit like just any sort of online forum, but it means that the participants can discuss what they want to discuss about the learning, and they can share, they can post videos and other information. So it's really a great functionality. And I'll just flick on to one of our programs, is the Trade Commissioner Development Program. Now, what's interesting about this program is the way that we run this. Now, it's a program for future trade commissioners. So it's our pipeline program, if you like, for someone to become a trade commissioner. And you've all heard of the 70-20-10 model of learning and development. Well, with the Trade Commissioner program, it's basically we mainly learning on the job and with the support of their peers. So it's probably more of a 80-15-5 model. The program goes for 2 years. Participants spend some time in Australia learning what Austrade does, and then we send them to a posting offshore for 2 years where they learn on the job. Our experience is that you have to be a lifelong learner to be able to succeed in this program, because it's all about your ability to learn about a new cultural environment, about the different markets, and about how we do our business. So I think this program definitely targets those lifelong learners and those people who are looking for an experience. Jeevan, I'm talking a bit much there. Do you want me to just keep going, or is that good?
Yep, absolutely. Keep going. Yep.
Okay, so thinking about my team, I've got a very small learning and development team. And when we talk about what our objectives are, it really is all about how do we enhance Austrade's learning culture. So how do we, create this culture of curiosity, or how do we support this culture of curiosity? How do we curate the best material? We don't have the resources really to build and design a lot of the programs. We have to basically have an architecture and find existing materials and adapt the materials. We try to get conversations going. We tend to invite external people into the organisation to get ideas flowing and conversations started. And I think if I think about our role, it really is about connecting people, connecting resources, and connecting tools. So finding who's the subject matter expert, and joining people up so that they can learn from each other and supporting them. So that really is how we approach learning and development in Austrade.
Thank you very much. Just a quick question on this. How much is the inherent nature of, for example, the trade commissioners to become these continuous learners? So, is it something that's kind of inherent in that profile of people?
I think it is. I think that curiosity, I think when we look, we have a lot of applications for this program. I think the last cohort we had possibly around 600 or 700 applications.
Yep.
And the ones that were successful were really those people who had an appetite to experience new and different things. They'd done amazing things offshore already in some cases. They'd learnt sometimes more than one language, multiple languages. They had deep interest in a couple of areas. So I really think it's a quality that's inherent that we search out and find to bring into Austrade. Yeah, and I think just in the way that we're seeing business change as well. Um, you might be an industry specialist, but you really have to keep up to date with what's happening in that industry to be able to support and advise exporters. And Jiwon, I know we've talked about this before, the ADDI model. The where when you do a program, you analyze, design, develop, implement, and then evaluate. And I have argued that, well, maybe that model is too slow for what we need today. And we're seeing a lot of value in the agile methodology, where you pull things together very quickly, iteratively, let them run and see how things go.
Thank you, Kristen.
Oh, and finally, if the listeners wanted to have a look at this TED Talk, it's as you know, I'm involved in TEDx Canberra as an organizer, and I think this is a great way for lifelong learning to get involved with your local TEDx. And this is one of the first TED Talks that I watched back in 2007 about the lifelong learner, and it's a great story, and I think it's a great one to watch.
Thank you very much, Kristen. Really great to hear what's happening at Austrade. It looks like a great learning environment. So I'm going to now hand it over to Rhonda. Rhonda, over to you. So you can run your own slides if you wish.
The sound's cutting in a little bit for me, in and out. Is it working for everybody?
Yep. Working well, Rhonda.
Oh, yep, okay, you can hear me. Okay, great. I couldn't hear anything. So I'll keep this fairly quick because the conversation that Kristen's just led on learning is clearly with deep learning expertise. While I've worked a lot in learning, I am fundamentally an OD specialist in HR. So the question that Jeevan asked for me was, why should organisations invest in making employees lifelong learners? And I think I'm speaking to a group of people who are probably drowning in agreement that they should. And deep expertise. So we certainly don't need to teach anyone how to do 101. But I just jotted down what I think are the main reasons. The first one is obviously grow people, grow your business. And this is clear. And it's not about compliance training that will grow your business. That will just hold it. It's the learning that is new or provides an unexpected perspective or idea and that different way of coming at things. So it's actually people that are growing in ways that you don't expect and don't naturally control can actually be your greatest asset, because they'll bring to your business a different way of looking at the world, a different idea, which is obviously what we all want. Second one is that context of control and power is gone. So our old, employers have the control test, and we own the labour, own the human capital, is rapidly in decline, if not completely dead. And already our big businesses are getting, in terms of people, getting smaller, and most of us work in small to medium-sized businesses already now. So we're really talking about a way of working that is moving from an employer-owned to being people owning their own human capital, which I think is really quite exciting. But it means that you've got to grow a very relevant workforce and have a way of motivating people to come and join you, because they can move quite easily between employers as opposed to being structured into the old contract of employment. And the third one, and most importantly, is because businesses are fundamentally part of society and not just a recipient of resources. And it's more than 10 years ago that Sam Mostyn started talking about full freight businesses, paying for all resources, including human capital. And that's coming a long way and certainly picking up a lot of momentum in conversations around the world. And fundamentally what that means is this crazy misconception of having a business sitting out here and the rest of society sitting over there, and we almost go, I'm giving them gifts of social responsibility or help or something, philanthropy, is rapidly being replaced by an understanding that businesses very fundamentally are all part of society, not necessarily in the middle. There's lots. I didn't realise this slide had movement on it, so I apologise for that. That's my we'll just quickly get on all the little businesses hopping in there. But that's what we've got there. And what you've got in that situation is businesses have to understand that they fundamentally are a part of society, and at a very minimum, they're helping build a society that will be good to do business in. And at the other side of it, they're part of an ecosystem where you're creating great skills for the skills they needed or the skills they wanted. And now we're talking about a very different environment where the skills that we need today are no longer available. We're literally importing them as best we can, although there's shortages all over the world. So what we're talking about is creating an environment where there is fast learning, there is fast opportunity, and there are ways of putting skills into the workforce that you may not necessarily be using right at the moment. And the final point from a HR specialist I thought I'd add is I think that lifelong learning and the responsibility of an organisation and the team to bring lifelong learning to life in an organisation and in the employee group doesn't necessarily have to start with learning. It's certainly one great place to start, but I think it might also start with things like performance. So performance discussion is not a KPI tick box sort of episode situation, but more how can I contribute, how can you contribute best, what do you need, and bringing in all the potential that a person has in whatever that may be. And that starts with a good performance discussion, which leads heavily into a good development discussion, which then leads across into learning, of course. And the next piece in there is work design, and we're now designing jobs much differently than we ever have. And that way of designing work so that you actually got a component of your job that you don't know how to do. So you're probably only ever knowing how to do well 80%, and 20% of your job is you're actually learning as you go. And that ability to learn on the job is one of the most fundamental and most engaging types of learning you can do is obviously practice. The one under that, understanding collective versus individual, is understanding impact and the learning possibilities of putting different groups together where they can actually swap skills or grow each other's skills or multiply different strengths that when they're sitting next to each other so that the sum of the whole is more than the parts. Rethinking HR and L&D, which is, there's been a massive shift in HR qualifications from being predominantly industrial relations, it's probably 30 years ago, to being heavily psychology, learning. And so there's a big move for our capability and the work that we do to be heavily focused in that area. And then rethinking employment, which is the one I mentioned earlier and is my personal passion, is that who owns the human capital at the moment is we've had this long-term view that it's owned by a company. And the data that's coming through on that, on skills, capability, learning, is actually that 80% of our employee data is dark, which means it's owned by a company, and only 20% of it's accessible in the general population or to an individual. And what we need to think about is if we want people to be really agile and owning their own human capital and having more control over their working life and their career, we probably need to pick up that dark data and make it transparent, or democratise it is the word that's used. So I think that will also give us a great lift in people being able to actually control their own working life and career and their own skills. And a good place to start for lifelong learning. Any comments?
Thank you, Rhonda. Thanks for that. Just a quick question. In terms of this new model that you've mentioned, or the new understanding of HR, how close is the current crop of HR leadership, or how aligned are they to the new philosophies that are coming through?
I can only measure this statistically. So if you measure it at the moment across ASX 100, the HRDs in about half those companies are actually trained as accountants. So you're talking about the group that's currently at the top is probably not as equipped to lead this change. Clearly the other half probably are, but the next generation that's coming through is not only highly qualified, but they've been taught that this is the way work will be. And so they haven't got the degree of let's control. Now, when I say that, I'm not just talking a linear generational sort of shift. It's a mindset shift, and what it means is that people who are progressive learners or lifelong learners themselves, and probably a lot of people on this call, will already be keeping up to date with a new way of thinking about employment without the control test, without owning human capital. And as a consequence, they'll be well positioned to lead a massive change in the way that we think about the HR function totally, and as a component of that, the learning and development function.
Thank you, Rhonda. I'll just...
very optimistic about the possibilities.
Thank you. On that optimistic note, we'll just go to the last section of the webinar, which is about really what's the business case and why companies should do it and how they should do it. So really, the three things that we talked about really was to make the workforce more nimble, and you know that actually kind of is really helpful for the structure of the organization, how it responds to business. I think workforce engagement is a big reason, and finally the whole idea of corporate social responsibility. So when you help employees to become lifelong learners and have skills for life, even though they may not be working for you in your organization, you are in a way contributing to society and the skill levels in the society and competitiveness of the nature and all those good things. Some figures. Why should companies help employees become lifelong learners? So you see some stats. Number one is in terms of the blue area in the Australian employment relationship here, this one here, the blue area is where it's the increase in part-time job. So you can see the full-time jobs, which were about 85, have come down to about 70%, and the trend is downwards. You can also see in terms of the same graph, a different graph showing the same kind of data is the growth in full-time and part-time employment. And you can see that the part-time employment has grown. And if we were to look up stats for casual contract work, that's also on the increase up. So the reality is that a good percentage of our workforce now is part-time, casual, contractor, contingent, right? In one of the organizations that I consult to, one of the banks, that number was as high as 49%. So 49% of their workforce was contingent, part-time, or casual, right? So it's a very interesting statistic. What that means is that it is increasing the choices of the kind of relationship that you have to work. So it could be an employee, which is full-time, part-time, but you've also got subcontractors, freelancers, on demand, and organizations love it because I think it gives them a more flexible cost base to work from and react to, market changes. But also, as Rhonda pointed out, that the people are taking control of their own human capital and exactly, what kind of work they want to do and where they want to do it and when they want to do it. So it's the changing nature of relationship between the employer and the workforce is changing. And some stats from the 2020 workforce report is 41% of the leaders who are surveyed says they are increasingly using contingent employees. 35% said that we are using seasonal employees, and going down consultant is 34%. Paid interns 26%, and some admitted to using unpaid interns 14%. So you can see it's a trend towards a more temporarization of the workforce, while probably you're still having a core workforce which is full-time. So I think essentially I'll probably skip the next slide, but look, the central message is that whatever learning is provided in the organization, if we look at this grid, you've got business relevance, low and high. So, and personal relevance. So what I mean is that is the learning relevant to the employee or the workforce? Low, high, so if you look at something that we are all familiar with, the business relevance being high, but the personal relevance being low is kind of compliance learning. So everybody just gets through it, needs to get done. You get the tick in the box, and it's all done, right? So that's that's where compliance learning is. Then you've got value-added learning. For example, you wanted to increase the commercial acumen of your managers, or how to be a better team leader, etc. Where there is high personal relevance, but there's also high business relevance. So this is obviously the sweet spot, right? This is where businesses would like to spend time, and you probably have a better learning outcome because people are also really interested in learning it. But if we go to the other side, where you've got where there is low business relevance and also low personal relevance, and we've kind of seen some of the inappropriate training being forced on employees. You really kind of shouldn't be doing that. So I call it junk learning. It really should be eliminated through better better analysis and a more granular approach to learning. But this is where, just above that is the altruistic learning. It's where the business relevance may not be that high. So the training but the personal relevance is really high. So I think one of the things that Kristen mentioned was, hobbies. So people doing photography, which is may not be that relevant to business, but it's really, really relevant to the person doing it, right? So what we're saying here is that by providing learning opportunities and by, providing some money to provide courses for what people want to learn, to look after themselves and have more employability, once they finish with your organization, is where organization should also provide support, right? So so this is what we call the altruistic learning. Not relevant, maybe not that much relevant to business, but really relevant to the workforce for their journey to the future. How can they do that? It's quite simple for organizations because you already have an infrastructure in place, and we're talking about kind of extending that infrastructure. So how do we do that? If you have a look at classroom training, online courses, further education, and coaching, just looking at those 4 components, and there are more, but I'll just kind of dwell on this one. Is, for example, in classroom training, you could open it up. You could say, anybody from the workforce, if you're interested in the topic, you can just come and attend the workshop, right? So while you could conduct classroom courses for people who need it, you could also possibly have another session open to anybody who wants to attend it, right? So this kind of extending your infrastructure. It's a matter of, I guess, organizing another session and then publicizing it so that people walk into the room and learn. Or in terms of lifelong skills, skills that financial retirement, those kind of skills, which you can organize classes specifically for that. And this can be done, for example, through the Superannuation Fund, who can come in and do the courses. So there are smart ways of kind of leveraging that. But another angle could be that you can actually extend your learning infrastructure and to the family members, right? So that's kind of now going more into the CSR area of providing that. Now there might be some issues with IT systems and etc. But certainly an idea that the infrastructure could be extended to the employee's family, right? So that might increase engagement because they get the message that the business is not just interested in the business; they're actually also interested in you and your family. Similar with online courses, you could make the online library available to everyone, like they've done in Austrade. Potentially again purchase or develop courses specifically meant for things like superannuation or financial planning, and same invite the family. Also maybe funding further education, kind of increase the funding and maybe reduce the ROI. So hopefully the employees don't have to give a solid ROI for the company because they're learning to build their own employability. And you've got coaching infrastructure in your organization, that could be extended to employees who may not be earmarked for that. So the whole idea is to kind of just extend your infrastructure. You will probably need to get some budget allocation to extend that infrastructure, but it's there to begin with. So I think that's probably where I want to finish, and we're pretty much at the end of time. Now, Learning Cafe, we really want to encourage this, and we've got some ideas. If there's any organization that really wants to architect this, please do talk to us. We'll be happy to discuss and help out. But I'd probably want to now kind of finish with finishing thoughts from Kristen and Rhonda, and maybe some tips or maybe a message for the most important message for the participants to take away. So, Kristen, can we just start with you, just in terms of a final point?
Just a final point, and we didn't really talk about the power of social media in learning. And gee, when I'm just thinking about how you identified me for this panel was from my posts on Twitter and LinkedIn around lifelong learning. So I think there's definitely a conversation to be had there too in the social media world, and how are we going to use that for learning purposes in the future. That's quite interesting, I think.
Rhonda, your views, your final point?
Oh, Rhonda's had to jump off. It got
All right.
really
Okay. Fair enough.
noisy
All
on.
right. So yep. So Rhonda must be in the plane. So look, thank you very much. And look, I've just got some feedback about the process to join the webinar. So this is kind of a new software. So we kind of need to figure out if there's an easier way. So we'll figure it out, and we'll try and make it easier for you to attend. But thank you very much for all those who were here. The recording will be there for those who weren't, and for all those people who participated in the chat, really enjoyed the chat. And Kristen and Rhonda are not here on the plane, but thank you very much for your time, and really appreciate you taking some time out of your busy schedule for the webinar.
Thanks, Stu, and thanks everyone for listening.
Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next time. Thanks, Kristen. I think pretty much everyone's out. So thanks for your time and all the hard work in the slides, putting up the slides.